Okay, Chair Paul, we're ready to go.
Okay, thank you, Corporate Officer. I'd like to call to order the Finance Committee for meeting for Wednesday, December the 7th. First up on our items of business is approval of the agenda. Are there any changes or amendments to it? Or a motion to adopt it? Okay, Director McCormick, Director Gisborne, is there any discussion on this? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Adoption of the minutes is the next item. The minutes of the Finance Committee meeting November 16th, 2022. Are there any errors or changes?
Okay, Chair
or
Paul,
omissions?
we're ready to go.
Okay, thank you, Corporate Officer. I'd like to call to order the Finance Committee adoption for meeting for seeing Director Gisborne, seconded by Director Brander. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. Carried. Thank you, Director Lennox. Delegations and inquiries, there are none. I don't believe. Are there any in the room? I don't think there are. Unfinished business, there's none. Correspondence, we have one item of correspondence with no specific action items. Does anyone have any business arising from the correspondence? Seeing none, we will move along. Nothing for business arising from correspondence. Reports. So I-8.1, our first report is the Accessible BC Act with a recommended motion. Is anyone, what's the wish of the board? Director McCormick? Move the recommendation? Yeah. Director Brander? Okay, so is there any discussion on this item? Director McCormick?
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I think it's great news. I think it's exciting that we're moving forward in the area of accessibility. I know this board has supported moving forward in this issue over the last term, and I know we'll continue to do so. I do have a question though, Chair, and that is if there is any funding that comes along with this new piece of legislation, which expects local governments to bring facilities into compliance with the Act. Is there any additional funding? Because it seems rather awkward without that.
I'll hand this over to staff, but I did look a little bit at this, and in the provincial website mentions government funding. It says the government, this is a quote from the provincial website, government is providing $3 million over 3 years to support organizations to meet the legal requirements. Funds will be administered by Disability Alliance of BC. So I'll hand it over to staff. Maybe there's some comments on how we might access that funding or if that is correct.
Thank you. Through the chair, that'll be probably one of the more important things that we'll be looking at to see if there is funding available to put these programs in place. I think the biggest thing is that this is a new frontier for us. It's not exactly a download per se, because it's something brand new that the province has initiated, but it's something that we must comply with. And to my knowledge and information, we have to comply by September of 2023. So it's going to be boots on the ground, and we're going to be making some hay right away.
Thank you, CEO. Director McCormick.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just to follow up then, it seems like what they're proposing is the peanuts compared to the money that local governments will be spending in this area. And so I'm concerned a little bit that this is going to put untoward pressure on the budget, which we're not, planning for, and that we're going to have a problem down the road trying to comply with this act without, because there can't be sufficient funding in the envelope that you've described and meet all local government's needs in the province. So I'm quite concerned about that.
Thank you, Director McCormick. I saw Director Elliott's hand up.
Thank you, Chair. So last year or two, I think it was, the CEPF put together a bit of a accessibility subcommittee, which Director McCormick and myself were both on, and we did come up with recommendations to start with some inventory that would have brought us a lot further along this path, but there was no funding attached to that either, and we didn't manage to move beyond that as far as I recall. So would this funding in this budget be to implement things like inventory so that we can get a plan together? Is that what it's for?
CAO.
Thanks, through the chair. We do not exactly know all of the ins and outs of what the province wants us to do. We expect that what you're talking about will be part of the program. And so that's what we're doing. We're going at this a little bit blindly, and we will also be most likely reaching out to Accessibility BC to get their input on it, to make sure we're going down the right path. But this is all about basically building this program from the ground up based on some information in the Act as well as in their new regulations. So there could be a whole lot of derivatives of that from each and every local government in the province.
Follow-up?
Yeah, yes, Director Elliott.
So my understanding is that it's not just governments that have to comply, but other organizations as well. And it sounds to me that like the fund that Director or Chair Fall was talking about was directed at non-government organizations. And I would assume that there would be some other package of funding that would be accessible by governments if there was one made, rather than that 3 million being administered through a nonprofit. What is your take on that?
CEO.
Through the chair, again, this is so brand new that we don't know where we're going or heading with this and what available monies are going to be out there for certain. The program sounds relatively simple in itself, because it's not really about the capital that they want us to be doing, but they want us to identify those things. So the mechanisms and the processes are basically what we're going to have to research to come up with. And the biggest thing I think that the province wants to stress is the availability of the public to be able to give their local government feedback on the accessibility of certain things. So one of the things that I'm thinking around in my head is maybe reaching out to our neighbors, the city, as well as Tla'amin Nation, to see if we should do this on a regional basis.
Thank you, Chair. Director Dowd, I believe I saw your hand up.
I did have my hand up, yeah. And, you know, when we read this is, in a lot of ways, it's a pretty exciting initiative. We'd already identified, and residents of the regional district had already identified that there are barriers to accessibility, and the regional district already expressed a desire to do something we can, or whatever we can, to fix that up. But this is a much more detailed plan. It requires us to establish a committee and to advise on how to remove barriers and prevent barriers to individuals. It has to include some people with disabilities on the committee, and they have to identify, remove, and prevent barriers again, and have to review that plan every 3 years. So it sounds like the creation of a plan for the entire regional district to do all of these things about accessibility. And I think $50,000 is a pretty minimal amount of money to try to do that, even just to get the consultation with everybody in the region and to identify barriers and to identify problems. But I don't see any funding being guaranteed from the provincial government or anybody else for this right now. But we have to have a plan, and we have to have it in the hands of the authorities by September of 2023. So I think what that means is we've got to find room in our budget for it. And you know, hopefully staff will be doing everything they can to try to find grants and other things. But it's an interesting project, but I think we're being asked to bite the bullet and cover the costs for now.
Thank you, Director Dowd. Is there anyone, Director Gisborne?
Thank you, Chair. I have a question about, you know, we have a requirement for the regional district to establish a committee to start addressing these accessibility issues. Are municipalities also required to establish a committee, or would it be possible for, say, the regional district and say the city of Powell River to like share a committee? Like if we were to establish a committee for both of our organizations, is that a possibility under this regulation? That's a question through the chair to our CAO.
Okay,
Thank you, Chair.
I'll pass it to the CAO. The city is one of the organizations listed, all municipalities, but I'm not sure about shared committees. The CAO may have information.
Through the chair, I'm not certain about that. And that's one of the things that we would be exploring because it would probably, hopefully, create some economies of scale and efficiencies if we could share a committee and go from there. But yeah, there's a number of organizations identified by the province that need to come to the plate on this, local governments being one, school divisions, post-secondary institutions, libraries, municipal police departments, health authorities, and the Crown Agency themselves as well. So there's a lot of people involved in this. And if I'm not mistaken, there was a very large number, an overwhelming majority of that number had to be completed by September of 23, and then a very small percentage in September of 24. And I haven't been able to determine who that small percentage is, but it is a public entity or a number of public entities.
Thank you, CAO. I'll make Director Gisborne. Are you done?
I'll wait. I see a lot of other hands going up. Thank you.
Okay, Director Lennox, you haven't spoken yet, and then I'll speak and then pass it over to Director McCormick. Director Lennox?
Chair, can you hear me well?
Yes.
Good. More accessibility issues here, but we're doing okay. I think I understand the intent of this, but the real question is probably for the CAO that the $50,000 is really, it looks like it's intended to better understand the requirements of this and to work on that specific work plan and identify those elements that we're talking about.
CAO, would you like to comment?
Through the chair, that's the plan. Yes, Director Lennox. And the idea then once we have that all figured out, then establish how that committee is going to look and operate.
Thank you,
CAO. So I'll make a couple comments, which is the act itself, it doesn't itself require a lot. It's requiring, and it's listed on our agenda. And now my pages are all mismatched because things have been changed order, but establish a committee so we can do that. Prepare an accessibility plan, which could be fairly costly and time consuming, but the accessibility plan needs to identify, remove, and prevent barriers and review it every 3 years. And then provide a means for the public to provide comments on accessibility issues. That's also quite straightforward. It doesn't require the organization to address those issues. It requires us to identify and make it clear. Now, of course, that would put pressure on organizations to deal with issues, and we'll deal with it over time. So I think it's the amount before us, the motion before us is for 50,000. I think that makes a lot of sense. I think we can do this. I believe there's a list of organizations in the regulation that has dates, and some of them are 2023. Most of them are 2023. Some are 2024. So that regional districts are 2023. So that's clear for us that we have to do this by next September. But I think this is a good step. And if it's not enough, we'll find out. I think it's a good proposal to go forward. So that's my comments. Is Director McCormick had her hand up?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just to repeat what Director Elliott mentioned, there is a subcommittee of Social Action Planning and Advisory, CEPF, and that is an accessibility subcommittee. CEPF is supported by all 3 local governments, and therefore, and it already exists. So working through CEPF on an accessibility committee, to me, makes a lot of sense. That doesn't mean we don't have to develop our own, inventory and plan, et cetera. But having a committee which represents all 3 governments and getting specialized people with experience in the field on that committee, I think is it's already there. So we don't need to reinvent the wheel. We can work with what we have and I think really move forward with that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Director McCormick. Are there any further comments? Director Dowd and Director Dowd.
No, just one last comment. So the motion we've actually got in front of us is to authorize $50,000 into the 2023 operational budget to support the committee. So I just have a question for staff is how did they arrive at the $50,000 figure?
Okay, I'll hand that to the CAO.
You know, it's not, you don't just pull it out of your hat. I just like an idea about what you included in possible costs.
Okay, CAO.
Through the chair, it was with consultation of my colleagues, other CAOs.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Board, is there any further discussion? Okay, seeing none, on the motion to authorize $50,000 for next year to start preliminary work on achieving compliance with the Accessible BC Act. All those in favor? All those opposed or any opposed? None carried. Okay, item 8.2, the financial plan draft 2. So I guess the process is to first hand it over to Ms. Greenan, our manager of financial services, and I expect she has some comments for us.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I do have a presentation, and since this agenda isn't as large as the last one, I think I'll try to take more time with it. If that's okay, I'll share my screen now.
Yes.
Thank you. So hopefully everyone can see my screen. Showing the Qathet Regional District 2023 to 2027 Financial Plan Draft 2.
Very clear.
Okay. So first I'll review, what I'll go over in this presentation. I'll go over how the plan is developed, the assumptions that went into developing the plan, some general notes about the plan, a review of the community works funds from 2023 projected out to 2027, some highlights of many of the services, some specific service notes, mainly for Northside Recreation, the requisition and tax rate changes from 2022 to 2023, and the average residential tax rates based on an average home in 2022. Then I'll review what the next steps are and then entertain any questions from the floor. So to develop the plan, staff starts with our work plans, and the work plans are developed in order to support the board's strategic plan and to attain the defined or perceived service levels that have been accepted. Input is received through many different areas, namely the OCP development processes and engagement processes, through advisory committees, through general public engagement activities, through studies and plans over the years, through asset management plans that are developed. And staff estimates specific service costs to operate each service. So what that means is that our budgets are zero-based. So rather than just look at what we've done in the past and apply a percentage increase, we look at what our work plans are and what it will take to operate each service. So we develop specific cost estimates for the work plans, and then for general costs, we just apply a percentage increase to based on CPI. Or a 2 to 3% increase. And then most of the budgets after 2023 aren't zero-based. They are just based on the 2023 projections plus a 2 to 3% increase on most costs. Okay. So many assumptions go into developing the financial plan. So as I mentioned, we have specific estimated costs, or we have just general increases between 2 to 6%. Insurance, we've estimated between 10 and 15% because the market really isn't certain yet. It was quite a hard market for a while, and it seems to be leveling off, but just to be prudent, we've put a 10 to 15% increase on. Return on investments, we're estimating 2%. We might get, with the CPI increases, we might get a better return on investments, but we didn't want to be overly optimistic. Equipment financing, we're budgeting about 4%. And then any future borrowing, we've increased our borrowing to 6% because the MFA 20-year indicative rate is 4.67%. And then there was another interest rate increase just announced today. So we want to be, we think around 6% is a good rate to be projecting. Payroll allocations are based on the 2021 time and motion. So that's basically what that means is that in 2021, staff looked at where their, many of the management, the exempt staff, they note where they've been spending their time, and then we allocate their payroll based on that time and motion study. So they've done another time and motion study in 2022, and then their payroll will get distributed based on that basis in 2023, but we don't have those numbers yet. Tax rates, when you look at the tax rates in the financial plan, in the reports, it's always represented as a residential tax rate per $100,000 of net taxable value. So if a business was looking at the financial plan, they would have to increase the assumptions to account for a business rate, which would be like 2.45% of an increase compared to a residential tax rate. Consumer price index, we're projecting about a 6% increase on contracts. The actual consumer price index will not be known until usually January 27th. It comes out, so then we'll know exactly what increase has to go into those contracts. Any actuals that you see in the financial plan are based on information that has been posted into the software system on November 28th, 2022. So they're just actuals. They're not projections to the end of the year. So as you have subsequent drafts of the financial plan, the actuals will keep being updated until the financial statements are completed in March 2023. As I said, the 2024 to 2027 financial plans are all based on about a 2 to 3% increase on most costs. Some costs do have some specific increases in them, but in general, they're about 2 to 3%. And the 2022 reserve funds that you'll see on each of the service exhibits, those interest earnings are just assumptions for the 2022 interest. And those won't be determined until about the end of January. Some other things to note are that the prior year surpluses as well that you'll see in the financial plan are estimates. So those won't be known until the financial statements are completed. And in most cases, we will recommend adding the prior year surpluses to reserve for most services. Some services, if for example, general administration, we do plan to carry a good portion of the surplus forward for use in 2023. And we still have some further information required from external agencies such as Kelly Creek Community School, North Island 911, etc. We do have the information from the Paul River Library, and their budget has been incorporated into this draft. Also to note is there's no funding in the proposed budget for volunteer fire department honorarium increases, which has been discussed, but it hasn't been incorporated into this draft. The Community Works Funds, I just wanted to give another overview of the Community Works Funds. So the regional district receives approximately $361,000 per year of Community Works Funds, and those are under an administrative agreement through the UBCM. So they are federal gas tax funds that the UBCM administers, and we have an agreement in place from 2014 until 2024. And in 2024, we expect that agreement will be renegotiated and that it'll be a continuing fund. In January 1st, 2023, we expect that we'll have approximately $1.8 million available. And we have preliminary allocations in this budget of $700,400 proposed for 2023. And so that would leave a budget of approximately $1.5 million available at the end of 2023. So some of the service highlights for 2023 are, for general administration, one of the major items is we have an IT server and backup replacement scheduled. In the planning department, there's a number of initiatives taking place. The Texada Island Drainage Study, the Housing Needs Assessment, Landside Hazard Assessment, Crompacher Road Zoning, Savory Island OCP Review and Update, Electoral Areas A, B, and C OCP amendments. And in the regional parks, we have completion of the Parks and Trails Strategy, the Craig Park Regreening Program, and that is through a BC Hydro grant. The Shelter Point Park Well, which started in 2022, but is expected to be completed in 2023. The Palm Beach Park Covered Gazebo, which is being donated by the Rotary, and many accessibility improvements across the parks. For the Savory Island Fire Protection Service, we have a replacement of engine 21. The replacement will start in 2023 and then be completed in 2024. Regional Emergency Program, we have continuation of the Regional Fire Smart Program and completion of the Lasqueti Island Emergency Supplies Container. Waste management, the big project, of course, for the Waste Management Service is the Resource Recovery Center, the buildings, infrastructure, access road equipment, and the waste transfer station. And on the Lasqueti Island, there is a purchase of a recycling pallet stacker planned. For the Northside Fire Service, we have Lund Hall water tanks will be installed and Craig Road Hall generator to be installed. Malaspina Fire Protection, their completion of the water refill station planned for the community services offices. For the Myrtle Pond Water Service, there's a water line upgrade planned, and we have been waiting for, we had applied for a grant for that upgrade, and we haven't heard yet whether that's been approved. So if it doesn't get approved, we might come back to the board to see about another way of funding that project. And also there's an asset management plan to be completed for the Myrtle Pond water system, and capital inclusion charge engagement. Earlier last month, you heard you gave second reading to the capital inclusion charge. So in early 2023, we will engage on that bylaw. For the Lund Sewer Service, there's a wastewater monitoring system. They call it a SCADA system planned to be installed. And that is dependent on having TELUS access. And there's an asset management plan to be completed. Texada Recreation, there is a resurfacing of the tennis courts in Billy's Bay, resurfacing of the Emily Lake Trail, a portion of it, and a covered gazebo at the Menanda Ball Field, and community hall flooring and stove replacement. At the Texada Island Airport, we're continuing with the crack sealing. There was crack sealing done in 2022, and there's some further work needs to be done in 2023. And there's a potential geotechnical hangar lot survey. That survey will be dependent on the new manager starting, and then giving direction on where, going forward with that plan. Northside Recreation, there's removal of the former fire hall planned, and the beginning of the recreation center upgrade expansion, and also the we'll be seeking elector approval for the borrowing for that expansion. The Savory Marine Service, there's a long-term engineering use study to be completed, and annually we'll be doing a dock and bottom inspection to see if dredging will be needed and when dredging will be needed. Lasqueti Marine, there's barge ramp lock block repairs, and an engineering inspection. So for the Northside Recreation, I just wanted to bring to your attention, in draft 2 of the budget, I have proposed, rather than adding 150,000 to the reserve in 2023 and 2024, I'm recommending that instead we do short-term borrowing for the $300,000 additional funding needed for the project. That way we could spread the payments out over a longer term, and we won't have that big increase in the requisition in 2023. So I just wanted to get a sense of what the board, if the board wants to go forward in that direction, rather than using the reserves to fund that project. And as I said, electoral area approval will be sought in early 2023. So as far as the requisition changes, these are quite similar to the changes that you would have seen at draft 1. There have been some minor changes between draft 1 and draft 2. And so the requisition is, for the city, is about $70.47 per 100,000. And then electoral area A, $294. Sabre Island, $173. Area B, $192. Area C, $200. Area D, $211. Area E, $234.92. And those they're comparable to the rates that you saw last year. As you can see here, there's changes between $7.40 per 100,000 in the city to $22 in electoral area A and electoral area E. And then this shows the change between 2021 and 2022. The tax rate changes are, the tax rate changes from 2021 to 2022. The reason that they went down was because the assessed values changed. So, so that's why you see a negative here. And in the 2023 requisition, it's an increase because we're using the same tax base as we used in 2022 because we haven't yet received the 2023 assessed values. And the annual cost per average home, we're using an average home value of $516,655, which is the based on the 2022 assessed values. So cost per average home, you're looking at between $364 per home in the city boundaries to $1,519 within electoral area A. And that would be for homes within the fire service area. And then this slide shows the change from the 2021 average value per average home to the 2022 value per average home. And the changes range from $55 in the city of Paul River to $167 in electoral area D, sorry. So the next steps for the budget are, I'll need direction at this meeting, any direction that I get at this meeting. And then in January 2023, we'll present draft 3 and draft 4 in February 2023. And then the plan is to adopt the budget in February 2023 as well. So I'd like to stop sharing my screen now and ask if there are any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Green. And I want to first thank all staff for contributing to getting us to this point. It's a huge job. Looks like a lot of work and went into this and a lot of work laid out for the upcoming year. So I really want to thank all the staff members who've got us to this point. So I'll open the floor for questions to Ms. Greenan on the financial plan. Do I see any hands up? Director Elliott?
Thank you, Chair. So I just wanted to ask about the waste management increase. Is that an operational increase, or is that for capital, or what is that because we're operating there now and we didn't before, or can you please help me with that?
I'll pass that to Ms. Greenan.
Thank you, Chair. Through the chair, yes, the majority of the increase in the waste management service is because we will have the debt for the Resource Recovery Center. The debt payments will start in 2023. Until now, we haven't drawn much of the debt. So that's the main reason for those increases. And I actually have a slide here that shows the budget increases for that service. So I'll just look at those right now. Oh, yeah, with the waste management service, it's all because of the debt interest. We're estimating about $300,000 of debt interest in 2023.
Thank you.
Do I see any other directors' hands up? Director McCormick? You're muted, I think.
Sorry, Director Lennox was next. I'm after him, I think.
Oh, okay. Sorry, Director Lennox, you fell off my screen. I got to make sure I get you
Not
on so I
very
can see you.
It's not
Director
very
Lennox.
often. Yeah, I don't fall off screens that easy, but I'm just trying to get up to speed. Maybe this through the chair, it might be for Mr. Devereaux. I'm just wondering about the Lund Hall water tanks. I've seen some up there. I'm just wondering, is there new ones coming? Is that what this is about?
I believe Mr. Devereaux's on the call. Does he have any information there? Oh, we can't hear you. Mr. Devereaux, you're something with your speaker we can't, or your microphone, we can't hear you.
Maybe he doesn't want to answer the question.
Sorry, Chair. You hear me now?
There you go. That's good.
I accidentally hit my mute button there on my headset. The manager of emergency services, Ryan Tom, could probably answer that question a lot better than me.
Oh, okay. I'll pass it over to Mr. Toms. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Through the chair. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Yeah, to answer Director Lennox's question, you're correct. We have the first phase of the tanks on top. We want to try to have enough to meet the Superior Tanker Shuttle Service minimum requirements, 25,000, 27,000, depending whether you're talking US Imperial. So we need to put some more tanks up top there to feed that hydrant that's down at the bottom by the Live Fire Training Center.
Okay, and what are we currently at approximately? Just half? Should we say half?
Correct.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, so do I see, Director McCormick was next, I believe.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I have two specific budget questions and then a comment. And my first question is about the budget for Texada Rescue, which is, let's see, I've got that on page 162 of my agenda. And my question is, they had requested an increase in their budget, which was how all the drama started with them a few months ago. And I don't see any increase in this budget over the previous year. I know that there was some legal money spent regarding a new bylaw to enable an increase, but I'm just wondering why there's sort of nothing in here that reflects any of that.
I'll hand that. Ms. Greenan may have some information.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Actually, I would like to direct this question to our Manager of Emergency Services, please.
Manager of Emergency Services, the floor is yours.
Yes, through the chair, per the board direction, we're in conversations with Van Anda and by extension Gillies Bay, looking at other opportunities. So we're keeping the status quo for now and looking at what's best given the requirements, the interest in maintaining the provincial reimbursements and the tax base there.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. I have one other question.
Yes, Director McCormick.
Okay, thank you. My other question pertains to social planning service, which is on page 133. And I recall when we were going through the 2 intakes of grant requests, which this board has already dealt with, there was a big pressure on social planning to fund, there was a lot more need than money, as it so often is, but I'm not seeing any increase. At least I don't obviously see an increase in the capacity of social planning to provide more grant funding. And so my question to staff, Chair, is about that. Will there be a greater capacity for more grant funding, and how would I fund that in the budget?
Yeah, I'll pass that to Ms. Green, and I believe part of the answer is if the board wants to allocate more, a motion could be put forward to increase that. But I'll pass it to Ms. Green, and she might have some more information.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, through the chair. The chair is correct that we would just need a board motion to, right now we have $96,000 allocated for social planning grants. So if the board would like, we could increase that amount.
Director McCormick?
Yeah, I would certainly support increasing that, perhaps by 25,000. And I don't know is it appropriate now to make that motion?
I think it's fine. I think because then we'll adopt the revised or draft of the budget. So I think it is appropriate. The corporate officer will correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that's the right process.
Okay.
So if you'd like to make a motion.
Yes, I would make a motion to increase the grant funding allocation in the budget for social planning by $25,000.
Is that clear, corporate officer? So it would be going from 96,000 to 121 or whatever that is.
Mm-hmm.
We'll just let the corporate officer catch that. Do we have a seconder for that motion? Is that Director Elliott seconding it? Okay. So while we get that, I think the intent is clear. Increase it by 25,000. Is there any discussion on this motion to add 25,000 to grants? Okay, Director McCormick.
Yeah, just to say that there is going to be increased pressure on social planning to provide grants for a whole range of needy projects. And so I would like to see an increased capacity in social planning to be able to address that need. So thank you.
Certainly, and I'll just say I agree. I think we struggled with this one and we ran out of money and so on. I think we're a bit short. Director Brander, you have your hand.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. It's possibly you already answered it for me. And I was curious as to if there was anything left in the social planning grant budget this year after we allocated all of our funding.
Ms. Greenan, do you know?
Thank you, Chair. No, all of the Director McCormick was correct that we have spent the entire budget, the entire $96,000 this year.
Thank you.
Okay, do we have any other questions? We have a motion before us. Okay, seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. So that's the increase by $25,000. Thank you, Director McCormick. Is that all for now?
Thank you, Chair. I did have one quick comment, but I'm willing to let others speak first, and then you can come back to me if you like.
Okay, we'll come back. So I saw Director Brander and I believe Director Doubt are on the speaking list, and then Director Lennox.
Okay.
Hopefully in the right order. Director Brander.
Thank you, Chair. Looking at page 27 out of 145, this is probably a question for Mr. Toms. Replacement of a mobile generator for $95,000. I went to an emergency preparedness workshop about a week and a half ago, run down at Kelly Creek School. And I'm just curious about the, I guess, capacity of the generator and how it is used, you know, in an emergency preparedness situation, should an emergency occur, and if there are any uses for it outside of that situation. I'm not against the purchase. I'm just kind of curious to know what capacity we have already.
Mr. Toms?
Yeah, through the chair. Yeah, we've been planning on this purchase for some time to replace the current mobile generator that we had bought secondhand several years ago to power the main office down at Marine Avenue. And it was a former rental, so it's getting long in the tooth. So we had budgeted this as upcoming in 2023. The cost is based on a quote, the best quote that I could get earlier this year. And in terms of other potential uses, it is mobile. It's in the 65 kilowatt range, so it would power a fair size facility. In the past, we have loaned our current generator out to the city when they had some challenges at City Hall. So it can move. The challenge, of course, is the wiring at the other end and whether facilities are able to receive it safely, legally. And but definitely it is mobile. We could send it around, but it's really earmarked for our main office to make sure we can keep operations going in a major power outage. And we do typically use it even just for the small power outages we have every year.
Okay, thanks. Chair, can I?
Yes, you can have a follow-up.
Great.
Another question.
Well, it's a different topic altogether. Page 66 out of 245, the illegal dumping expense has been increased from 3,000 to 11,000. And I'm just curious if there's been evidence to merit this jump, because this year actual expenses are shown to be just $1,400. I'm curious if there was a increased problem that we're seeing.
I see Ms. Greenan with her hand up.
Thank you, Chair. I might direct that question to the Manager of Operational Services. I think I'll just give a little bit of a preamble to it, is that what we had been doing since COVID started was we were just having organizations dropping off, community groups dropping off illegal dumping. But I think that the 11,000 is to support a more traditional type of event. But I'll let the manager speak to that.
Okay, Mr. Devereaux, do you have further info?
Yes, Chair, I can. We're going back. We have a planned trash bash in 2023 for the first time since I think it's going to be 2019 now. So, and that's what it's used for. And there is a little bit of money in there for events, sort of like the one in Lasqueti, the cleanup at the dump there for some other illegal dumping that happens. But the majority is the trash bash.
Great.
Thank you. Okay, on to Director Doubt.
Just a simple question. I'm looking at I think it's Appendix A there, and it's got the requisition for participating areas, and the city's participation in the shared services there goes up. The tax rate changes from the previous draft was, I think, $6.85, and now it's $7.40 is the requisition change. 55-cent change since draft one, and I haven't seen any particular change of any large magnitude. Is that all just because of the changes in assumptions for interest rates and price increases, or is there something else I'm missing?
Ms. Greenan, you might be able to know the answer to that.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we did have, we had a few changes from draft one to draft two. Like in the waste management service, we added $21,000 to that budget. So it's some small changes that we made in our cost estimates from draft one to draft two. I'm just going to look at a summary of all of the changes we made from draft one to draft two. Yeah. So the changes we made in draft one, what we added was we had a new per load rate from Regional Disposal Company, and that was based on their contract is based on a CPI increase in the United States. And so once they applied that CPI increase and we have a new per load rate, we had to increase that. So that was a change to the budget to update that. And we've also based that on a 1.36% US exchange rate. And then other than that, we added some director travel costs to the general administration budget. And that is actually to allow the chair to travel from Lesquity to Paul River so that he can attend more meetings in person. So we have an estimate for that. And we've added a part-time communications student to the budget. And then a couple of other things. We also added washer and dryer installation at the community services office, and we added $6,000 for a headstone lifting project at the cemetery. So all of those changes combined make up the change, the 55-cent change between draft 1 and draft 2.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, are there any further questions? I haven't spoken yet, and I'll go for second time round. I just have a couple comments, and a comment and one question. So the overall increase looks a lot, but I just want to make sure that everyone knows a lot of it's inflation. I mean, the 6% inflation just pushes things up. We've struggled in the past with smaller levels of increases, but this is unavoidable. We've seen it coming all year, and it's just how it is. So I think that has to be taken into account when thinking about what the overall increases look like. And another aspect is that the tax rates will adjust once the assessments are available, which I assume will be in January, February. So the actual tax rates per 100,000 assessed values will go up or down depending on what happens with those. And that won't just change, that may shift the balance between participating areas too, because if Lesquity Island properties go up a lot more than everywhere else, or down, or not as much up, then that will shift the burden onto or off for the shared services. The one question I have, which is for Mr. Tom's manager of emergency services, I've received some correspondence or emails with a representative from Pete's Lake Water User Society about a storage tank, and I understand. I suggested that, so the suggestion was that Pete's Lake Water User Society, which runs this water system on Lesquity, would be willing to co-purchase a water storage tank somewhere on the line. I suggested they talk to Darcy Pascal, who's our local he's our emergency coordinator, and he's a deputy in the fire department. And I believe Mr. Grinnell sent some information. He told me he sent some information to you. So I don't know if that's in here or what the status of that is, or if it's something that's underway or not possible. So that's my question. Is there any information on that tank? Is it a feasible idea or is it not feasible?
Chair, in response to that, the best I can say is I had heard some rumblings from our fire chief several months ago. I haven't heard anything more, and I don't believe I've seen anything from Mr. Grinnell. So maybe you could encourage that, and we could take a look at that. But my understanding was it was possible fire protection in a water tank, and it was vague at best. And
okay, thank you. Last I heard, I understood everything got put through, but thank you for that. I will follow back up with Mr. Grinnell. He's written to me a few times, and I said, well, this is the right process. I will make sure a proposal comes forward. And then you may be able to assess which service it might come from, if it's possible, what level of sharing. I believe they're willing to pay half of it, but the details need to be obviously in some information, so I will get that forward. The last point I want to make before Ms. Green asked about Northside Recreation, the borrowing and paying, and I'd be interested to hear from Director Lennox, but I actually think the proposal put forward by financial staff makes a lot of sense. Stretch this out over a few years. It is short term, 5 years, so that helps reduce the pain for the taxpayer rather than trying to get that to be shouldered in a shorter term. But that's my thought on it. I will go around to a second round. I don't know. So Director, okay. So I'll go Director McCormick, Director Lennox, Director Elliott, and Director. I think everyone wants to speak again. So I'll start with Director McCormick.
Thank you. I'm really concerned about the increase in the waste management budget. In many ways, it seems to be sucking things out of every other aspect of the budget. When I look at the annual requisition comparison for each of the areas, And I see a 20% increase in the waste management budget. And I think that's very concerning because I always knew this day was going to come with this project. And I have to say, I've not been the biggest fan, although I admit it's a good project, but I think it's way too expensive. And I'm really concerned about the impact this year, particularly on our budget and our taxpayers. We're going to be paying the interest charges on this money that we borrowed. So I guess, yeah, is there anything that we can do to bring that debt burden down or that tax burden down for this year? And that's my question, I guess, Chair, to our financial people.
Thank you. I'll hand that over to Ms. Green and maybe she can help.
Thank you, Chair. Through the Chair, what we're trying to do is we have applied for a grant for the waste transfer station, and we expect to find out about that grant in January. So if that grant application is successful, then that will help alleviate the borrowing. We won't have to borrow as much. Other than that, it's really difficult with waste management. I mean, we're mandated to make these improvements through the Ministry of Environment. It's unfortunate that we don't have the manager of asset management here right now to speak to this. I don't really. We're doing our best. Like we've chosen the least expensive and the best option for this jurisdiction. For example, when the closure plan was developed in 2014, there was a few options in there, and one of the options was for the city to simply close that facility, for the regional district to just simply close that the former transfer station or transfer site, and the cost of that alone was going to be over $12 million in 2014 dollars. And so we chose the option of closing it and developing it into this waste resource recovery center. So while it seems like a high price tag, when we look at all that we're achieving with the money that we've budgeted, it is much better than the other alternative of simply closing the site, and then it would just be there would be nothing on that site. It would just be ready for something else to happen, and then the next step would have to happen. And the other difficult part is that we know that there are improvements that needed to be made at the contracted site, which would also cost money. So I mean, even if the contractor did them, the cost would end up coming back to the taxpayers at some point. So we're trying to do the best that we can for the least dollar.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Green. So I'll go to Director Lennox. I'll try to go in round, and I'm sorry I couldn't see the order that people popped their hands up. So I'll go to Director Lennox.
No, thank you, Chair. I'm really just, again, I'm trying to understand quite a big plan here, and I did want to talk a little bit about the special note on the short-term borrowing versus the reserve, and I just need to understand that better. Maybe I just need a little more explanation from our financial folks, but I think what the intent is to spread the costs out. I think that's what you said. So maybe you could just explain it a little bit more to me, and maybe I need to take it offline and have a special meeting, but I do want to understand this better.
Okay, Ms. Greenan.
Thank you, Chair. Through the Chair, yes. So when we looked at the project budget, we applied for the grant quite a while ago, and then when we actually got advised that the grant was approved, we looked at the cost to see if we were going to be able to still manage the project for the cost that we had estimated. And when we looked at that, we figured we would need about an additional $300,000 to complete the project. And this is, based on our best estimates. We don't have, they're class D estimates based from the engineers. So we'll know better when we actually go out to RFP and get some Class A estimates in. But basically, we needed an extra $300,000. So what we thought was if we just put some funding into the budget in 2023 and 2024 from the reserve, that would shore up the $300,000. However, that would mean a big spike in the requisition in 2023. So you would see, as you saw in draft 2, there was going to be a big spike in the requisition. And we always like to stabilize the requisitions, have a more even increase every year. And so by doing the short-term borrowing, we can spread the costs out. Instead of having that big $150,000 hit, we could just do like a $75,000 for the first couple of years, and then pay it off over the 5-year term. And we don't need, we wouldn't need public approval for that, the $300,000 short-term borrowing. It would be borrowing under liabilities under agreement. And so the QRD board would have to make an agreement with the Municipal Finance Authority. And then we could do the short-term borrowing, and it would stabilize the requisition.
Okay, thank you. That's your recommendation, though.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll pass it over to Director Elliott, and then Director Brander and Director Doubt. Director Elliott.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. So I just have sort of one question and a comment. I'll start with the question. The question is around the rec center. I've noticed that the requisitions for the rec center have stayed static, and yet recreational center costs will climb along with everything else. So it seems there's no fairness in how that affects the city people. And I just thought, maybe is that because that's a static agreement within the contract with no care for the inflationary expenses of the rec center, or why would that be?
Ms. Greenan.
Thank you, through the chair. We do have an agreement with the city of Paul River, and that agreement ends on December 31st, 2023. So I would probably should put this question, any further questions about this, through the CAO. More information on that.
Does the CAO have it's on your lap?
It's a big smile.
You've got the ball now.
She's happy.
Through the chair, I think the manager of financial services answered most of the question, and that is the agreement is in place until 2023. At that time, further negotiations could evolve and establish a different or an increased pay scheme or remuneration to the city regarding our contributions. But we are in place right now, and to the best of my knowledge, there was not any inflationary factors put into the agreement, nor were there any kind of like negotiation factors midterm, etc.
How silly of us. And then my comment that I wanted to make was the CFOs said we were not including increases to volunteer fire department honoraria within the budget, even though it's probably a good idea to do that. And I'm wondering, is that because we would use surpluses to do that if we wanted to do it and then include it next year? Is there a strategy behind that? Or is that going to prevent us from increasing our honoraria to volunteer fire departments?
Ms. Greenan.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to direct this question to the Manager of Emergency Services.
Mr. Thoms.
Yeah, through the chair. Sorry, could you repeat that question again? I'm just not sure.
Questions about honorarium. So they're not right. This draft has no increase, and does that limit us in any way? And why is that, I guess? Yeah,
through the chair. It's where it is right now, where we are in the budgeting process. We intend to have some more conversations before the budgets are done, and we do need some more direction that will need to come to you in the new year over. We just wanted to make sure that we're flagging that you're not, there has been some correspondences coming to this board in the past, and we know it's a topic to look at. but I just wanted to make sure that everyone was clear as you're looking at the numbers and the bottom line, that at this point, there's nothing changed in that. So does that answer the question?
I guess so. It seems to me my information coming from all sources is that maintaining adequate numbers of volunteers on the fire departments across the board has been very difficult. And so it'd be hard to get away with not increasing those monies. And so I'm hearing you say that your plan is to recommend an increase and you haven't put that together to bring to us yet.
Through the chair, I think it's premature for us to say we're recommending any increases, but we are recommending some board direction on how we can proceed to look at that. Absolutely agree with your comment, though, about the challenges with volunteer recruitment and retention.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Thoms, Director Elliott, Director Brander, and then Director Dout. Director Brander.
Thanks, Chair. I'm going back to the RRC, the Resource Recovery Center, and we've got a lot of capital budget items listed this year. I guess I'm just kind of curious as to, are we still on time frame that we should expect in 2024 and beyond, that most of the expenses will be more, I guess, regular instead of these large expenses that we're being hit with?
I'll pass that to Ms. Greenan, but I believe that because the manager of asset management isn't here, we might it might be worthwhile for us to have a little bit more in-depth discussion on the whole RRC, the whole waste management service at the next finance meeting, because that's actually the lion's share of the total increase of our tax requisition. So I think there's a lot of information, but I'll pass this to Ms. Green, and maybe she can help with the specific question about capital projects and are we on time?
Thank you, Chair. Through the chair, yes. So we there have been increases, and there will be further increases in 2024 when the full debt is in place, because this is just a partial part of the debt payment. There are going to be further increases for the debt payment. But once the RRC is operational, then we have to get all of the details down about how the facility will be operating and how that will change our other operations. And like Chair Falls says, we will need to have a more in-depth discussion down the road with the manager of asset management to figure out exactly how the costs for operating that facility will come together, like how it's all going to be operated and what kinds of cost changes that will mean.
Great, thank you.
Help Director Dout.
Well, I didn't have a question until everybody started asking. I've got a couple of comments. But...
Okay, it's all yours.
The first thing I'd like to say is I would really like to have, and it's nice to see all the interest in the Resource Recovery Center that's been going on since before I ever lived here. It's probably 10 years before I moved here, the discussion about the old incinerator site and the Resource Recovery Center was happening. And so many things have happened that I think a lot of people have forgotten about the process we went through. But I would really like to have a detailed update from staff on where we are now with the Resource Recovery Center, how far we've come, where we are now, and where we go to cross the finish line having an operating facility there. And yes, when it's operating, it's going to have all those things going with it. But I'd like to see an update, hopefully at a public meeting where we can all actually celebrate what's happening, because I think we can be pretty darn proud of what's been done at the site already with limited funds compared to what original budgets were. But I think it would be good just for ourselves and for the community to get an update on where we are. And as I was driving by the site of the Resource Recovery Center this afternoon, I noticed that you can, as the leaves are all off the trees now, you can see a lot of activity going on the site. So it'd be nice to have an update on where we're going with that. But it is obviously the most significant change in our budget, probably this year and next year anyway.
Thank you, Director Dout. I agree. And maybe I'll just see with our corporate officer, that might be something she might have comments on. Is this something that could come forward to a meeting, and I don't know which meeting, but you know, I would leave it to staff to figure out which meeting. But is this something that would be feasible for an upcoming meeting? A bit of an update item on status of the RRC?
Thank you, through the chair. Is at the pleasure of the board, what you guys want to hear information on. So that would be good at either a finance or potentially a committee of the meeting.
Right, sounds like either of those. Do we need a motion to do that, or was that something that would it help? I see.
I'll make a motion.
Okay, so okay, seconded. I see it. So the motion is to direct staff to bring forward a presentation on the Resource Recovery Center status. Is that something like that?
Excellent.
Yes.
Okay. Just trying to get some words so it can actually have some. Okay, so is there discussion on this motion, which is to have staff prepare and present something on the current status of the RRC? Seeing none. Oh, I see Director Gisborne. Yeah.
Oh, thank you, Chair. Just a question for the staff. Is there any estimate on the financial implications if this motion passes to our staff, like staff time, staff resources?
Corporate officer, do we have the time to do this, or is this going to be adding a burden?
Well, it always takes time to prepare information, so it would take staff time to do that. So, but if it's priority of the board, then we would just it would become a priority of staff, and we would bring it forward.
Okay, so this is a priority of the board. So the motion is to ask staff to do this. It doesn't necessarily have to be a big fancy presentation. Just I mean, I think an update on items and a question answer could be helpful. So we don't burden. I mean, during the budget season, if we want a fancier presentation, then it would probably be best to do after the budget's finalized. But that probably doesn't help us as much as a shorter presentation. But anyways, that's the motion before us. Is there any further comments on the motion? Director McCormick?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just to say that I support the motion. Although this is my third term here, I still feel that I don't know enough about this project. I am concerned about the amount of financial resources it consumes. So having a look at where it's at right now, I would welcome that. Thank you.
Okay, any further discussion? Director Elliott.
Thank you, Chair. So I would find it really helpful if the presentation also covered a little bit of the history behind the project as far as the options that were chosen versus the other options, because I'm hearing that there's some very positive news in that regard, and I'd like to understand a little bit more about that.
Okay, staff's corporate officers hearing that. Is there any further discussion on the question? Seeing none, I'll call out Director Gisborne.
Oh, thank you. I think I'll support the motion. I'm just going to express a little bit of concern. My understanding is everyone around the board is concerned about the burden on the taxpayers, especially in relation to the Resource Recovery Center, because it is a big project. It's, I think, probably one of the biggest projects this regional district has ever done. And hearing from the other members of the board, we're all concerned about the financial implications and financial impact on our taxpayers. So sure, I would be happy to see an updated progress report. I think there's already quite a bit of information already available on this project on our website. But I don't want to see this become a major financial burden for our communities to get this information. My understanding is that the project is moving forward. We have the plans all in place. I think the plan was put in place and the ball got rolling many years ago before I was even elected to this board. So I'm a little torn, but I'll support the recommendation as long as it doesn't become too financially burdensome and doesn't take away much staff time from other priorities that they're currently very busy working on. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, Thank you. Is there any final comments? Okay, seeing none, I will call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, it's carried. Okay, thank you. We're on to, so we've all had, I believe, at least 2 sets of comments on the draft. Is there anyone who has any final burning comments? And hopefully keep it short because we've been on this issue for a lot of the meeting time. So Director Gisborne.
Thank you, Chair. I have a question about Haywire Bay Park. I'm looking on, I think, page 192 of our agenda. And I am seeing expenses under 2022 infrastructure, $70,000 under infrastructure for Haywire Bay Park. I'd just like a little bit more detail from our staff for what that $70,000 was for.
Ms. Greenan, do you have an answer for that?
Thank you, Chair. Just sorry, I just want to find that.
That would be, I think, 192 out of 304, or page 20 out of 84.
Okay, thank you.
It's under capital expenses.
Okay.
And sorry if I sound awful, I'm sick.
That's okay. I just wanted to find.
I expect that maybe for Mr. Devereaux, maybe I can direct the question his way. He might know better where that that item is for.
To the chair, if I may.
Yeah.
Could you tell me the year again, please, Director Gisborne?
It says year to date, it says 2022 budget and then variance, and then it's current year versus prior year. And there is a $70,000 infrastructure expense, and I was just wondering what that was for.
So if you may remember that the board had approved a septic field and sandy dump at Haywire Bay if 35,000 could be found elsewhere in grant approvals. So that was in our budget. We were not successful in the grant, and that item has been taken off of the budget, so it's no longer there.
Okay, thank you. And a quick follow-up, because I found the sandy dump listed elsewhere under capital expenses, and I believe it's scheduled for 2027 under capital expense. So, okay, that makes sense. Thank you. No further questions, Chair.
Thank you, Director Gisborne. Are there any further questions on the financial plan? Any further changes at this time? Okay, seeing none, we have a motion, a recommended motion to accept draft 2 as guiding information, and as guiding information the proposed 2023 to 2027 financial plan. Would someone like to move that recommendation? Director Lennox, do I see a seconder? Director Gisborne. Okay, is there any discussion on this motion? Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? None? Carried. Okay, thank you. That was very good. So item 8.3 is the 2023 revenue anticipation borrowing bylaw, and the recommendation is to endorse the revenue anticipation borrowing bylaw number 583 to provide revenue anticipation borrowing for the 2023 fiscal year, and that the bylaw be forwarded to the December board meeting for first reading through adoption. Director Gisborne moving the motion. Someone like to second it? Director Lennox. And comment? Any discussion? Seeing none, call the question. Oh, Director Lennox, you have a question?
Yeah, just because I'm learning here from reading the motion, this is a normal practice here due to the timing of these events, right? So we borrow, yes, and we get the funding.
Why don't I let Ms. Greenan answer that, which will be probably to say yes, but I'll let her explain it.
Thank you, through the chair. Yes, so this is, it's a legislative requirement that we have to have a revenue anticipation borrowing bylaw in order to fund us until our requisition comes in August, on August 1st. And so this then allows the bank to give us a line of credit for up to $1.7 million. We don't generally draw on it because we do have other cash flows, but it does need to be in place. It's a legislative requirement.
Thank you. So any further questions and discussion? Seeing none, I will call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Seeing none. I can't see Director Gisborne for the moment, but carried. Okay, thank you. Item 8.4, interim financial statements to November 30th, 2022. The recommendation is to accept the interim financial statements for information, and I believe financial staff are here, and Mr. Cohenhoven prepared this. He might be available for questions if we want to. And I don't know if we should ask questions first, but we can put the motion on the table, I believe, and then ask questions. Someone like to, Director Gisborne, someone like to second that? Director Elliott, is there any discussion on this item? Seeing none, I have a question and a comment about honorariums in the LIVFD budget. The question, Mr. Cohenhoven may be able to answer, but what is the latest in that honorarium expenditures that are incurred for 2022 can be submitted by regional fire departments under the 2022 budget? Is it December 31st, or can they be submitted? Can an honorarium expenditures for 2022 be submitted in January or February?
Through the chair, we actually don't know how much to pay out for honorariums until the end of December. So it is practice to pay those in January. We would accept claims in January, absolutely.
Okay, thank you very much. In my comment, so that helps a lot. As I've brought up on several occasions in the past, the LIVFD honorariums aren't being spent. In this interim statements, the amount for Malaspina Volunteer Fire Department are at 74%. So we're at 92% through the year, so that's okay. Sabre Island Volunteer Fire Department are at 55%. Northside Volunteer Fire Department are at 72%, and LIVFD are at 13%. In other words, less than $5,000 out of $36,000 has been spent to date. And if we follow on the same tracks as previous years, we will spend $6,000, $7,000. Last summer, we received a raft of letters from Lasqueti residents and LIVFD volunteers about this issue. If we want to retain and recruit LIVFD volunteers, they need to receive honorariums to feel valued by the community and to offset costs they incur serving the public. The tax-paying public wants this money to be spent. In February 2021, the board directed staff to develop a comprehensive honorarium policy, which staff is developing in consultation with the regional fire chiefs, and I look forward to seeing this brought to the board when complete. In the meantime, honorariums are dispersed based on an interim policy that seems to only allow honorariums to certified firefighters and not to first responders who are considered firefighters in our policy and have certification for first response, but most of whom on Lasqueti do not have certification for firefighting. On Lasqueti, these first responders handle the large majority of emergency calls. I do not want or intend to apply any pressure on staff or the fire chiefs as they work through a policy to bring forward, but neither do I want LIVFD volunteers to continue to feel left out in the cold with only a fraction of the honorarium budget being dispersed over the last few years. In my view, a simple change in the interim would enable honorarium support for all LIVFD volunteers, and I will be putting forward a notice of motion at the committee of the whole meeting tomorrow on this topic, but I speak of it now because it's in the interim financial statements before us. Okay, thank you. Is there any further discussion on this item? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? None carried. Item 8.5, Director Remuneration and Expense Amendment. So we have a recommendation before us to approve a 6% increase to directors' annual indemnity and meeting allowance rates for 2023, and a recommendation that the board amend the distance allowance to reference the Canada Revenue Agency automobile allowance rates for the calendar year, and that amendment bylaw be forwarded to the December board meeting for first reading through adoption. Do I have a motion? Someone like to move the recommendation? Director Brander, seconder. Director Lennox. I got to get Director McCormick back on the screen because I can't see her. Okay, so is there any discussion on this item? Director Elliott.
Just a question. I heard earlier in our CFO's presentation that the index that we're using to decide the 6% doesn't actually get determined until January. So I wonder, is this a preliminary decision, or do we decide it based on not knowing the January, whatever it was, date that the actual computer price index comes out, that this is apparently based on? And so my question is this a final decision, or is this interim to knowing what that CPI is?
Ms. Greenan.
Yeah,
Jason.
Director
I'd like to direct the question to the Assistant Manager of Financial Services, if I could.
Okay, Mr. Cohenhoven.
Thank you, through the chair. The way this policy is written is that we are basing this increase on the September to September CPI to allow us to have final numbers and have this decision as final for January 1st.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion on this item? Director Dowd, I did see your hand up. Thank you, CAO.
Yeah, I think we need to spend some time thinking about this one. And I think the policy we're talking about, I think I can remember when we adopted it, it was when inflation was rather predictable and rather low. And we've been through a really low inflation rate for a period of time. But it's not that way now. It's particularly high this year. Who knows if that's going to continue? But I'd like to pay attention to some of the other numbers. We saw the assumptions on our financial plan, and that is union agreed wage scale for our employees, our QP employees, of 2.25% this year. I don't know about anybody else. It makes me feel a little bit uncomfortable to know that our employees are going to expect a 2.25% wage increase while we give ourselves 6%. I know that's in keeping with keeping up with inflation, but I really would like to spend some time putting some thought to that. And one of the questions that comes to my mind is when our next negotiations with QP come up for the regional district.
CAO?
Through the chair, that contract expires as well in December of 23.
I thought it was coming up fairly soon. But, I, for one, think we might want to rethink this. So that's my input for the present time. There's plenty more changes as we get, plenty more opportunities as we get to other stages of the budget, but I'm taking a hard look at this idea.
Before I see Director Gisborne, but a question I have for Mr. Cohenhoven first. If the recommendation includes forwarding this to the December board meeting, is there an implication if we were to not do this before the year end, and if we were to do this in January, would that cause some problems for financial staff?
Through the chair, I think it is ideal to have this in place for January 1st as it is an annual rate. That said, I would like to ask the CFO to weigh in just to make sure I'm on the right track here.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Greenan?
Thank you, through the chair. Yes, it is an annual rate. So if it does get approved later than January, the annual rate can be retroactive so that it gets caught up. But the one thing that would change would be any of the other allowances in there. For example, the meeting allowances, they're on a per meeting basis. So that would mean that any meetings before the bylaw is adopted would be paid at the old rates. And then any meetings after the bylaw is adopted would be paid at the new rates.
Great.
For example, and then the same with the distance allowance. That would be based on the old language until the new bylaw is adopted.
Right, makes sense. Thank you. Director Gisborne.
Thank you, Chair. Just two things. My first one is, I guess it's a question through the chair to our CAO. Director Doubt has brought up the number 2.25 for our union employees. I just want to double check. Is that number correct for the wage increase for our unionized employees?
CAO?
The chair, yes, it is.
Okay. And then my second one is I would like to put forward an amendment that 6% be striked out and be replaced with 2.25% in the motion.
CAO, before I entertain a seconder, CAO has a...
Through the chair, I think you need to change our bylaw before you can go forward with that amendment, because staff are working off of policy, which is directed through bylaw. So that bylaw would have to come back and be amended to change the percentage rate.
Right. So is there a so that motion's been made. It seems to be maybe not in order. It would actually be problematic. So I think if that motion was to be made, it would have to include more in it to review the bylaw. Director, CAO.
Through the chair, to add to that, I understand, or at least I'm interpreting that there wants to be, or the board may want to have more time to consider what's before them right now. There would be nothing wrong in passing this, and then at the board meeting only adopting maybe the mileage rate, and then at that point directing staff to come back with a bylaw amendment or something for you to consider in the new year to amend the bylaw to a percentage rate that would be more applicable for you.
Thank you, CAO. I was going to mention something like that. So if that option would be to pass it tonight and at the board meeting pull it out of the consent agenda if it passed unanimously. If it didn't, it would be already out, and then consider punting forward the remuneration piece of it to the future with some feedback from staff. Director Elliott.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm of the opinion that we have a bylaw on something that has a schedule for the current board, whoever is on the board at the time that they do these schedules, so that we don't rehash necessarily ad hoc every time as the way things are perceived change. I think that if the board who created that CPI decision at the time that they did that thought it was better to tie it to union wage increases, then that's what they would have said. I'm thinking predictability around all things is better when we don't try to undo the past decisions and move forward on the current schedule. There is a schedule to look at this, and it isn't right now. I think we're overcomplicating things, and directors don't get paid very much, and we're not talking about very much money. So I think it's not worth the staff time. It's not worth any of this, and that we should stick to our bylaw and move forward.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else who hasn't spoken yet on this issue, and then I'll recognize Director Gisborne. Okay, Director Brander, and then Director Gisborne.
I'd just like to say that I generally agree with Director Elliott and her assessment of the situation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Director Gisborne.
Thank you, Chair. My amendment is for the annual indemnity and the payment for per meeting rates. It is not about distance allowable claims. It's only the first part of the motion because this is a three-part motion. My understanding is the second part has to do with the distance allowance claims will be paid at Canada Revenue Agency automobile allowance rate for the calendar year. My amendment doesn't impact that. It only would be the per meeting allowance and also the annual indemnity. And from hearing from our CAO that the the amount is tied to that CPI in the bylaw. I'm just taking a look at the bylaw right now that's included in our staff report. And I'm just wondering which part of the bylaw kind of ties us to that CPI, because I'm seeing 1.1, which is the annual indemnity amount, and then 1.2, which is the meeting allowances, which is, as I understand it, for like alternate directors and the Tla'amin Nation director for hospital district. So I'm just wondering about that limitation on going from 6% to the 2.25 restriction, where that's contained in the bylaw.
Do you have an answer for that?
Through the chair, I believe the CFO has a response.
Okay, Ms. Greenan.
Thank you, through the chair. That's actually, sorry, in the policy, in the board directors remuneration policy number 4.10 is where the where it directs us to use the CPI increase as recorded by Stats Canada for the preceding 12-month period ending September 30th. So it's tied to the policy.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Chair. And then in that case, my understanding is that policy it's very valuable, and it's helpful to our staff to bring forward the recommendations. However, my understanding is that the board is not bound by the policy. The board can choose to adopt a different bylaw if we so choose, hence why I've put forward that amendment. So I guess my next question is more of a procedural one. Since I've put forward an amendment and I've heard other directors speaking in relation to it, does that mean that the amendment has been seconded under Robert's rules?
Corporate officer?
Well, I think it would be up to the assembly to determine and the chair to determine if that motion is on the table. You can, if a motion isn't seconded, but a member speaks to that motion, it could be considered on the table, but it would have to be determined by the assembly if that was the intention of continuing the conversation.
Okay, thank you. What I'll say is it would be cleanest. I would say the amendment isn't out of order, but we weren't speaking to the amendment per se. I would say it's cleanest, rather than trying to say that it was seconded, to put forward the amendment again as a motion, and we'll see if there's a seconder.
Okay, I will put forward the amendment again.
Okay, to change the 6% to the 2.25. Okay,
yes.
Is there a seconder for that amendment? I see none. So we're, Director Dowd? Are you seconding that?
I am.
Okay. Okay, it's been seconded. So the amendment, so speaking to the amendment now to change 6.0% to 2.25%, which would vary from our policy. Director Gisborne?
I'll be quick. Thank you, Chair. And I'd like to thank Director Dowd for bringing this item up in relation to our union workers and the rest. Yes, the consumer price index is going up high. Inflation is going quite high, but a lot of people in our community and our staff, they're not seeing their wages increasing at the same rate. And I think, everyone is having a bit of a challenge. And I think that, I know elected officials, we don't get paid much, but I think it's a sign of leadership to kind of bear the burden equally along with others. Hence why I've put forward this amendment, and I'm comfortable with 2.25%. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Are there any Director Dowd and then Director Elliott?
Just want to go talk a little bit about why I support this bylaw. First is, I think we have a policy, and it's up to the board to interpret our policy of what we want to do, and we have the ability to do that. I think we should look at changes like that, not as necessarily programmed and carved in stone, but as something we can think about when the appropriate time comes up. And annually seems to be a good time to do that. I think this is an unusual circumstance compared to the last few years and results in a larger increase to directors than has normally happened. I'm not saying that we should follow our union collective agreement, but I'm saying we should take into account the surroundings that we face. And looking at that, I think taxpayers are also facing some increases. I know that as I said at city council meetings, people are worried to be hearing that they might have a tax increase of somewhere around 5%. The regional district tax increase for a resident of the city seems to be about 10% right now. And I know from experience that every taxpayer in the area will say to me the first time they see me, how is it that you get a 6% rate increase? Other people get much less, and our taxes are going up by even more than that. We'll be looking for an explanation. So I think we owe this careful thought.
Thank you, Director Dowder. Are there any further comments? I'll make one comment, Director Elliott, and then I'll comment.
Thank you, Director Elliott. So creating policy on the fly is not an advisable thing for a government to do. So I'm not supporting this amendment, not because I don't understand the heartfelt desire to share the pain. I'm of the opinion that when we create policies, we should operate by those policies. And if we don't think we should operate by those policies, we should entertain changing the policies. And so whatever it is that is required to change the policy should be addressed prior to not operating by policy. So I'm thinking we put a lot of thought into policies that we create. If they're not working for us, we should change those policies. And clearly people were happy with this policy until the policy did something they thought was extraordinary. So clearly maybe the policy needs to change and CPI should not be in the policy. I don't like CPIs being in policies, and I would be totally in favor of, entertaining that, throwing that policy out there, changing it, and then operating by whatever policy it is that we approve. But I'm not really in favor of approving things that are contrary to policy without changing the policy. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. And I'll just comment that first two little comments. Either whether this amendment passes or not does not preclude the suggestion by the CAO that when this comes before the board, we can always pull it out and pass it off to staff and adjust the idea, the amount, pass all of it except for the 6% or 2.25%, and have that come forward in January with further information. And also, it doesn't necessarily, going from 6% to 2.25 doesn't necessarily mean we have to change the policy. Having a lower than CPI amount just means we are foregoing, the board is foregoing that amount of remuneration increase by CPI, meaning we're falling behind by that amount for the future unless we went above CPI in the future. So that's the implication of it. It doesn't need to change the policy per se, but those are my comments. So I will ask if is there any further question on the debate on this? Seeing none, I will call the question. All those in favor of changing from 6%, this is the amendment, to 6% to 2.25. Favor? All opposed? Okay, it does not carry. So we're back to the main motion, which is unmodified. So do we have any further debate on that item, on that motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? None carried. Okay, 8.6, the 2022 Regional District Audit Service Plan. That the recommendation is that the committee recommend the board endorse the 2022 Audit Service Plan as proposed by MNP LLP, and that the committee recommend the board direct staff to add the projected costs of $4,000 for the work associated with application of CAS 315 to the 2023 budget for audit services. Is someone wanting to make that motion, that recommendation? Director Brander, do I see a seconder? Director McCormick, any discussion on this item? Seeing none, I will call the question. All those in favor? opposed? None carried. Thank you. Seems a fairly standard item of business. So we're now back to what used to be 8.1, but it's 8.7. The annual affordable housing plan to access 2023 municipal and regional district tax fund. And I believe we have someone from Housing Hope program of Powell River.
Yes.
Corporate officer, should we hear from the representative, the delegate first, or should we get a motion on the table? What would be preferable?
Thank you, Chair Fall. I believe Manager of Planning Services, Laura Rodden, was going to do a short presentation first. And entertain questions.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Ms. Rodden, would you like to take over our screens?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I would like to just pick up on what the corporate officer mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, in that the recommendation in the report, there was an error in the original version. It referred to 2022 and 2023 MRTD dollars, but it's actually 2021 and 2022 MRDT dollars. So just want to make sure all the directors were clear on that and that you have the updated version. And I believe my report to the committee is fairly straightforward. I really just wanted to highlight that this is a good news report. It's about an ongoing source of funding to support affordable housing in our region, albeit a modest amount. It is ongoing, and it's money generated through a 2% tax that's levied on the sales of short-term accommodations through Airbnb and VRBO. And the Ministry of Finance collects the tax. It flows from the province to the Sunshine Coast Tourism, and then to the Qathet Regional District. And since 2020, the Qathet Regional District has dispersed these funds to the Housing Hope program of the Powell River Educational Services Society. And the Housing Hope program has administered the dollars to provide short-term housing supports for local workers who are struggling with housing insecurity. And I did include in the appendix the most recent report from Housing Hope on the use of the funds. And I did want to highlight that the province has recognized the work that's been accomplished here in our region with this money. BC Housing Policy Branch has been impressed by the reporting. And Kathleen O'Neill is here in person. So I thought it would be nice for the directors to hear firsthand from her where the money is going. And if you have any questions, you can ask her.
So I don't want to. Is the board okay to have Ms. O'Neill present to us on this item? Seeing every consensus. Okay, Ms. O'Neill, would you have the floor?
Okay, thank you. I brought some of the cards that we use. We kind of use these postcards all around town in different, cafes, grocery stores, just to, there's another one. You can kind of see they give information, all the contact. I don't know if you've had a chance to read my report. We've only actually mobilized the funding for the very first year. We got 2020 funding at the end of the summer because there were some changes in personnel all through the RD. So I only have 1 year's report. We've only just received this money, so we'll be running it October to October of next year. What we see, because it's such a small amount of money, $40,000, originally it was there, for big cities, large regional districts, they probably get several million. But with that amount of money, there's no chance of building housing. So we incorporated our Housing Hope model into, you can keep them if you like, drop them off, show them friends, into the issue of worker housing. And we basically, it's a self-referral. Other people can refer you. It's voluntary, it's confidential. Our offices are very low-key. Nobody needs to be worried about coming to see us because we do so many different things. You never know what a person might be there for. There are a lot of families with what we see, the really critical areas are young single workers and a lot of single female workers raising kids. So what we do is provide, if somebody is housed, we try to improve their stability, say they're in rental arrears or they've got, they can't pay utilities, or when you're on a limited income, it can be pretty treacherous to have even a small change in your finances or your situation. And so we served in with the funding that we kept those people. If they weren't housed, we got them housed, or if they were housed, we kept them housed. And it seems to be a really effective model. We're very low key. We're not like, we don't have a kind of social work. It's almost like, yeah, it's tough out there. Everything is individualized to what the person or the family actually needs. You know, so we don't come at it with a plan. We kind of, our intake process is pretty good for unearthing all the issues for somebody, and then we take it from there. And yeah, I'm a fanatic for collecting demographic information on the people that we serve, because I really want to be able to portray who's in need in the community.
Thank you very much. So I just want to thank you for presenting to us. The report in the attachment is very detailed, and you say probably more detailed than the province even requires, but I really appreciated seeing all that detail. It was great. And also just to say, you know, and this is the over 80% of the funding going to indirect and direct financial supports was great to see. So this is being put.
And that's kind of a model. Yeah, we've been running our federally funded program since 2014, and it works. More housing would really make it work just like a hot down. But so we've been doing this successfully year over year, and it's every year I have to apply for the funding, and that's kind of our model anyway, is 75 to 80% direct service dollars.
So do we have any questions? We have a motion that we'll be considering in a moment, but do we have questions for Ms. O'Neill? Director Doudt?
Yeah, thanks for doing what you're doing. Sounds like you're making it, looks like in your report, you're making a difference in what's happening. And I wanted to see a report on this for a little while, but it's, you know, I think it's a useful kind of funding coming from the tourist industry, basically, to help local people. It's important. I'm trying to sort out the actual dollar figures that we're talking about. I think can I finish my question? I think you said so far you've received
1 year
of $40,000.
Yeah.
Okay, and when Sunshine Coast Tourism tells us, they say they've sent a check for $86,000 for 2019 and 2020.
Yeah, so combined.
Another $76,000 for 2022, in 2022 for 2021, and then there will be some future 2022 money. So have I got?
I think so. We've basically,
money's coming, but it isn't in your hands yet.
Not in our hands, or the funding for 2020 just got into our hands in October. So this was our first round of funding. What we did, we didn't know if it would go on. It was, I think, an experiment for everybody. But so now, yeah, now we should be able to be a little bit more tickety-boo, where we can predict that this is actually coming and when it's coming.
Yeah, I see part of our motion that we're going to be talking about a little while, continuing the commitment between you and the regional district. And you know, probably a good thing. So do you see being able to expand your work as the
Yeah, I do.
increase, because tourism is increasing and the number of short-term rentals?
Yeah, which was a real surprise to see. Even over 1 year, we got slightly more from 2020, I think $5,000 more. That goes a long way. I'm really concerned by how many children are at risk in our community that, you know, we had applied. So we try to keep amplifying this. So we had applied to create a resiliency retreat for the kids that were within our service group. Because it's really well known in literature that if you experience housing insecurity or homelessness as a child, you're exponentially more likely to experience that as an adult. So we looked at different ways. So we've tried, we still don't have the funding, but we keep going to different funders. We're looking for money to run a resiliency camp for children to give them the skills to be adaptive and proactive in some of these circumstances. That's not with this funding, but those are everywhere we see need, we try to bring in a different kind of approach as well. There's a lot of work done for children in urban settings who are actually homeless, but there's very little research about children in a family unit or that is homeless. And you know, I'm you know, we've been doing this for, I guess, 8 years now, and I get more and more passionate about it every year. I'd really love to see you advocate with the city to establish a housing authority. There is land. We need to have a plan for the whole community. This is a little bit of a Band-Aid on a whale, as far as I'm concerned, in terms of what's really out there. You know, they're on our Housing Hope funding. We have 120 people on top of this group. So that's too many people in our community and way too many kids. And kids are more than 50% of the population that we're serving. And they're with great parents. It's not like there's the issue is poverty and housing insecurity. You know, now I think we had in our Housing Hope, which is really focused on families with children, not workers, but specifically families with children. This helped us because it let us take some money that we would have had to. We always go over a budget and our funders always give us more. We've been really lucky. They trust what we do. But this let us go further and help more people. But I can't stress enough how. So this particular first quarter of this year in just our Housing Hope, you know, we had projected, we always say, oh, we think we'll serve 100 people. We had 89, an intake in our first quarter of 89 people. So we look at seniors living alone as well. And we look at youth because the BC Housing Solutions, like these are not people with additional problems. They're people who are on low income. And they can't afford to live here.
Thank you. So, sorry.
One closing comment. So,
yes.
Thank you for what you do. And when I've got a different hat on, we can talk about the housing authority with the city.
I would love to.
And I think there's some room to do things on that. So thank you for doing what you do. I think the money is going to a good place. I'm going to support this motion.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Director Elliott, and then questions, and then Director McCormick.
Thank you. Elliott. Thank you so much. Do you keep statistics about your intakes and what's happening to them? And I kind of quickly reviewed the report. It didn't seem to talk about those. Did I miss it?
About
the statistics around your intakes and that sort of stuff. Maybe I'm looking at the wrong.
So on page 2, we do our individuals served, total workers, unemployed spouses, and children. So the total, I'm sorry, it's 65. I didn't have my glasses on. And then different 25 households. So I think it takes the money quite a long way. What we try not to do is, you know, we don't have any stigma about using our service. We don't have any judgment about the people using our service. We try to, it's kind of like a booster, because like I say, when you're on limited income, everything, one small thing going wrong can make everything go wrong. And then next thing you know, you're not housed anymore. So we try to make every dollar go as far as we can. We're kind of like come in, we do our intake, we get the background, they know we're there. And usually it's just one little boost that they need and they don't come back. But sometimes people come back repeatedly, and then we look for deeper problems.
Right. So our vacancy rate is low. Housing availability is very small.
Yeah.
So are there people that just can't find a place to go, even if they have money?
Yeah, they cannot.
Are you able to help them?
Well, what we do a housing search as well. So we look across all platforms. We summarize that and send it out to everybody who's searching for housing. Some people, like you see, they're evicted for renovations. They're evicted for there are lots of forces at work in the housing market, not just locally, but globally, that haven't really been addressed. I think we could be the little town that could. Like I get really excited about that. And, it's so expensive to build new housing. I think we need some really pretty radical approaches. We need to look at new models for housing. How we're gonna, I think we can get out of this, but we really have to be committed. And I've been part of the municipal housing roundtable. It used to be an ad hoc committee on homelessness. When we first launched, the first year of funding that we had from the feds was only for youth. And everybody said, that's not, enough. I said, well, actually, we found 40 homeless kids in our community who were trying to work, whatever. And it made a huge difference. But at the time when we started, and it was like over 18 months, the housing market radically changed everywhere. And it's changing in tiny towns like BC, where you think, who's even living there, right? The housing shortage is so massive, universal, all of the Western world. I mean, I think we need to dig in and look at, as a community, evaluating what's actually going on here. Real estate's become an investment, and at the expense of housing is a human right. And I could rant on and on.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have another question from Director McCormick, I believe.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And first of all, I just want to say thank you, Kathleen, for doing what you're doing. It may be a Band-Aid on a whale, but you got to start somewhere. And I think given that it's been 1 year, you've done a terrific job in bringing this issue forward. Housing is permeating every section of our regional district in terms of becoming a driving issue. We can't grow unless there's more housing. We can't attract workers unless there's more housing. We can't really, move forward unless there's more housing. And so what you're doing is a start. I think it's terrific. I'd love to see this continue on, and I will support the recommendation. And I'm going to look forward to some bigger things coming in the future. So I just really want to say thank you very much.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions from? So thank you, Ms. O'Neill. I'd just like to say, obviously, it's a big. Oh, somebody else. Oh, Director Gisborne, sorry.
Thank you, Chair Fall. And thank you, Kathleen, for coming in to speak with us. I don't really have any questions about the kind of work you do. I'm very impressed by your presentation. I'm just wondering, because I would like to talk to you more about housing and the challenges that we're experiencing in this community. I've been kind of shocked by how many people I went to school with who have good jobs that are saying, I can't afford to live here anymore. And given the last few months, I've known several that they've up and moved to Alberta. And I'm like, but you have good money, you have good income, and they're like, I have kids and I can't stay here anymore. So it is a huge problem. It's having a major impact all across the board. I would love to talk to you more and in depth. I'm sure you've already said you could talk about housing, and I don't think we all want to sit here for the next 3 hours talking about housing, because it's a finance committee meeting. So I was just wondering, is the best way to contact you through press, or is there just through press?
That's a great way. And I'll give everybody my cell phone number if you'd like it. You can always reach me there. 604-223-0870. I'm also leading my agency through accreditation and launching a bunch of new programs. And I just got funding to create a dating website for developmentally disabled people. So social networking, we're not calling it dating. I'm pretty busy, but that's the kind of person who's always rushing around getting more stuff done. So
okay, just to double check, 223-0870.
That's right. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Kathleen. And no further questions from myself.
Yeah, are there any other questions before I? So thank you, Ms. O'Neill. You can see this is obviously a huge problem, and there's a lot of interest around the table. We try to struggle through what we are able to do, and this is at least, you know, a small bit. We can use this funding to you know, to good use, and it looks like it's being used very well. So there's a lot of appreciation here, and you're welcome to stay. We're going to be dealing with the recommendation right away. In fact,
yeah, I will stay because then I have to go and write the plan.
Okay. So thank you very much for your presentation. It was really, and the report was really great. So we really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, now, so we have the recommendation before us to authorize the Housing Hope Program of Press to prepare and submit an annual affordable housing tactical plan for Sunshine Coast Tourism to access 2021 and 2022 municipal and regional district tax funds and continue their work to deliver affordable housing for workers in the Qathet region. Would someone like to
recommendation?
Director McCormick, would someone like to second that? Director Lennox, any discussion on the item before us? Okay, seeing none, I will call the question. All those in favor? I don't see anyone opposed, so I'm not even going to call it. Passed unanimously. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We're on to our next item, which is new business. There is none. Question period. Is there Mr. Galinsky?
Thank you, Chair. I'm here. My first question is with regard to draft 2 of the financial plan. I'm wondering if the manager of financial services through the chair knows the amount of money that is going to be borrowed in 2023 for the Resource Recovery Center.
Thank you, through the chair. Yes, so in 2023, the borrowing has already been approved. There's been in 2017, there was $5.5 million of borrowing approved, and then in 2021 a further $6.4 million approved. So we will just be acting on that borrowing. So the amount that's budgeted for 2023 is $11.2 million of the previously approved borrowing.
I thank the manager of financial services for that detailed response. With regard to the director's remuneration and expenses, Chair, the amendment failed, so the motion carried as was, or the recommendation carried as was written. Am I correct in that, Chair?
Correct. That will come before the board, and given the discussion we had, I would anticipate that there's a high likelihood that there will be further discussion on it at the board meeting when it comes forward.
I thank you for that response. My last question is also with regard to that item. It seems to me that with each new board that consultants are hired to take a look at director's remuneration and expense. Is that something that will be taking place in the new year, Chair?
I'm not aware of any specifics. Maybe our Ms. Greenan, Manager of Financial Services, may know. Ms. Greenan?
Thank you, through the chair. The policy provides that the board that there will be a review. So what it is every 4 years, 1 year prior to the local government elections, the board will assess the need for a comprehensive review. So last year, 1 year before, the board said they did not want a comprehensive review. So that wasn't done last year, but in 3 years' time, they could, we could assess the need for a comprehensive review at that point.
I thank the Manager of Financial Services for refreshing my memory. Those were my questions, Chair. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Okay, you're welcome. I can't see if there's anyone else in the audience, if there's further questions. I believe not. So there's no in-camera session. We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone. It was a very good meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you. Morning.
Thank you. Good night. See you Thursday.